Good morning. It's Monday morning here at St. John, and this is a video to update you on our second session on the Augsburg Confession yesterday here at church. We didn't get it recorded yesterday. We had a lot going on here at St. John. We celebrated the 101st birthday of one of our members. He was in church with us, and we had a celebration afterwards. And then I had to exit a little early to do some Southern District business at another congregation here in town, and I had to be there by noon. So our Bible study was fairly brief, but I think I can summarize our conversation here for you in the next few minutes. So, as I said, we're going through the Augsburg Confession, and a week ago, on the 14th, we spent our day learning about the historical context of the Augsburg Confession and what that entailed. It was in 1530 was the date of the Diet of Augsburg, and as we gathered yesterday, we talked about how in the preface to the Augsburg Confession, those nobles who were writing to Charles asked him to impress upon the Pope a need for another church council. Now, there have been 21 ecumenical councils. Those are when all of the leaders of the worldwide church come together and discuss theology or practice or whatever matters they feel there needs to be unanimous consent on. And there were quite a few at the beginning. That's how we came up with the Nicene Creed, and some other very important things happened in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries. But then as time went on and the church got more and more organized and a structure of a hierarchy emerged, those got fewer and fewer in between. And so to the point that by the time of the Reformation, the latest council had been fairly recently. It was the Fifth Lateran Council, which wrapped up in 1517. And one of the main items that they conferred at that council was that indulgences were acceptable and valid. And of course, this was what prompted Martin Luther to post his 95 Theses in October of 1517. Stating about all these 95 reasons why indulgences were not according to God's will. So fast forward, and the Reformation has taken root. There are lots of things going on. And at this time now, of course, sales of indulgences have dropped in the areas where the Lutherans have been preaching against them. And so the allies of the Pope, who's trying to raise money to finish St. Peter's in Rome, are lumping the reformers in with a lot of other heretics, both in their current age, but even in times gone by. And so we begin our talk today then with the first three articles of the Augsburg Confession, which focus on the nature of God, concerning original sin, and concerning the Son of God. Those are the three main things that really set us apart as a faith, right? Our understanding of our Trinitarian God, as well as how we came about to acquire sin, and then who is this Jesus that we claim to believe in who gets rid of that sin. These are quite important articles. Now, in between the Lateran Council in 1517, then comes the Trent Council, which began in 1545, so 15 years after Augsburg. It went for a few years till 49, then started up again from 51 to 52, and then concluded after a 10-year break in 62 and 63. And so among other things, the Council of Trent obviously was speaking to the errors of the Protestant reformers, or at least their perceived errors. But it also reformed teaching and the role of the Bible and tradition. So it kind of solidified the importance of tradition, which was one of the things the Reformers really railed against, saying just because we do it for a long time doesn't mean it's God's will. But Trent also affirms some things of grace and sin and justification by faith, although they didn't say justification came by faith alone, like the Reformers did. They affirmed the Mass as a real sacrifice. That is, every time the Mass was said, Jesus' body and blood was sacrificed anew, or continued. The sacrifice of the cross continued. But some good things came out of Trent as well in terms of reforming the clergy and holding them to a moral standard, which hadn't been done for quite a while. And it promoted religious instruction, as they could see that the Protestants were really promoting education amongst young people, both boys and girls. And so Trent also established the importance of seminaries for the training of future pastors, because it was just a really sad state of uneducated priests running around the country trying to lead the people. They could recite the Mass in Latin, but they had no idea what they were saying or what any of it meant. So this need was addressed in the Council of Trent. So that's the historic setting. But if we go back to these three articles, it's important, as I said, that the Reformers wanted to make sure that they were set apart from the heretics. They were out to show and to prove that the Protestant churches were indeed Orthodox Christians, that they were a part of the church, and they were not in any way trying to break away from the Roman Catholic Church. They were protesting the abuses and the wrong teachings, and they had hoped that by bringing the civil realm into things, that they could put pressure on Charles to get the Pope to listen to them. So, like I said, the first article starts with their confession of the triune God. And there's one divine essence, which is called God and is God. He is eternal, incorporeal, that means he doesn't have a body, indivisible, of immeasurable power, wisdom, and goodness, the creator and preserver of all things, visible and invisible. Yet there are three persons, co-eternal, and of the same essence and power, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the term person is used for that meaning which the Church's authors used in this case, to signify not a part or a quality in another, but that which subsists in itself. So they're really talking about the unity of God here. And this is what they taught and confessed. And they say that this is nothing more than a restatement of what was decreed at the Council of Nicaea so long ago. Then, as is common in many of the articles of the Augsburg Confession, they follow up that paragraph of affirmation of the Trinity with a paragraph which describes what they condemn in their churches. So it says they condemn all heresies that have arisen against this article, such as the Manichaeans, who posited two principles, one good and another evil. Likewise, those of the Valentinians, Arians, Eunomians, Mohammedans, and all others like them. They condemn the Samosatenians, old and new, who contend that there is only one person, and cleverly and impiously argue that the Word and the Holy Spirit are not distinct persons, but that the Word signifies a spoken word, and Spirit a created movement in things. So, if you want to look up those heresies, they're ancient in nature, but they throughout time they gain traction because they're attractive. Okay, they're easier to understand. Our idea of the Trinity is very, very baffling. How can something be one God but with three persons? And so, people have tried over the years, people like Arius and other church fathers who got it wrong, according to the rest of the church, in their quest to try to make things understandable for people. and some of them were just really wrong, like the one that said that the Word and the Holy Spirit were not part of the Godhead, but just kind of affectations of it. And so the reformers here set out, or the princes in the reformed lands set out for the emperor why it is they should not be cast aside, that they do preach the true faith, and that they put down any of these other heresies that have risen up over the ages. Okay, so that's the first article. The second one is concerning original sin. And that's basically that, we inherit it from Adam, and we're born with it, and that we're born without the fear of God, without trusting God, and with this natural, the word they use is concupiscence. It's kind of this, it's specifically a natural desire for lust, if you will, that this is a key component of humanity. And it says, and they teach that this disease or original fault is truly sin, which even now damns and brings eternal death to those who are not born again through baptism and the Spirit. It's a condition we're all born with, and it's fatal. Now, that's the affirmation of what is original sin. Now, this is what they condemn. They said they condemn the Pelagians and others who deny that the original fault is sin, and who, in order to diminish the glory of Christ's merits and benefits, argue that human beings can be justified before God by their own powers of reason. In other words, the Pelagians said, now you're not born with sin, you just start doing it. And so if basically if we could somehow isolate ourselves from sinful influence, or maybe if we could train ourselves to avoid sin or put down sin, we could find ourselves at the end of our life as righteous and earning heaven, earning the ability to walk into heaven because we have been without sin. Now, of course, this is a hopeless endeavor because everybody knows that we all sin, that we all make mistakes, that we all have consciences that tell us, well, that was not right, that was not what we should have done. And so the Pelagians never really had a large presence in the church, but it's still attractive, right? We want to think we can do better. We'd like to think that we can affect some change in our spiritual welfare. And while we certainly do strive for that, we can't place our hope on our own strength and our own will and our own effort. We must rely upon the gospel. So but on the other hand, too, we can't just say, well, there's no use even trying. I'm just going to let God forgive me and keep living my life as I want. That's the opposite end of things. So we Lutherans are sometimes accused of relying upon cheap grace. That is, well, God's got to forgive me, so what does it matter what I do? And on the other spectrum, we have those folks who are in what we call I'm drawing a blank. In the holiness churches, that's what I was trying to think of. Probably the biggest one that I'm familiar with, because they were headquartered in our town when we lived in Kansas City, was the Nazarenes, and they believe and strive to sin less and less every day. And it's certainly a good practice to be about. But where the problem comes in is when there isn't a balance of preaching the gospel with the law, and then people might become full of despair, and I messed up again, I sinned again, I'm not a good Christian, and they rely too much upon their own efforts and forget that there is still grace even when we don't match up to God's expectations. So that's Article 2 concerning original sin. Third article concerning the Son of God, again, is to put him in the Trinity, to include him as the eternal Godhead. And it's a fairly lengthy paragraph because there is some specificity to it. But the main thing they wanted to point out is, as opposed to some of the other general heresies over the time and some specific to that day, they wanted to point out that Jesus is co-eternal with God. He has no beginning. At different times in the church, there was a thought that maybe Jesus didn't exist at creation, that he came from God at some point later in time, certainly before Bethlehem, but sometime between creation, or maybe right at, we just don't know. But anyway, so that's the thinking there that some had, that Jesus wasn't fully part of the Trinity because he didn't start with the Trinity. Well, the Reformers, the Reformed princes said, no, we need to, we affirm that Jesus is part of the Trinity, always was, and always will be. And he came to this earth as both God and man. He did not stop being the part of the Godhead. He was not an incomplete person. He was fully both. And that is what we affirm in the third article of the Augsburg Confession. Interestingly, there is no condemnation paragraph. They simply let their faith and their explanation of the Christ stand on its own merits, and they don't get into all of the various heresies that have been talked about over the ages concerning Jesus, probably because they addressed most of those up above in the first article concerning God himself. All right, and that's the material we covered this week in our Bible study. I hope you'll join us this next week when we get into one of the biggies, Article 4, concerning justification. It's very short. You could probably even memorize it. I think it's three sentences long, but it is kind of one of the foundations of Lutheranism. And then we go into 5 concerning ministry in the church. This was important, referring to the Holy Spirit and baptism, and so we'll get to those two. Maybe Article 6 concerning new obedience, but I won't promise it. All right, please join us in worship on Sunday at 9:15. Our Bible study starts at 10:45. So even if you can't make it to church, try our Bible study. We'd love to have you come grab a cup of coffee with us, or a juice, or one of our brunch items that we have every week. And it's great fellowship. It's great time to get to know your fellow Christians in a new way as we explore these topics together. And the questions that our attendees have been peppering me with are it's been amazing. I don't know all the answers. I try to fill in the gaps. But we do have a couple of lay people who are excellent historians as well, who help me with this as well. So again, join us this Sunday, either in person or online at 9:15. And both our worship service and our Bible studies are available on our website all through the week. Our worship service we still do on Facebook just because our equipment is set up for that. Our Bible studies are on YouTube. We're hoping to merge the two into one resource down the line. But for now, you can reach both on our front page at stjohnlutherannola.com. stjohnlutherannola.com. Thanks so much, and have a great day in the Lord.